How's it going, you guys? And welcome back to the channel. Well, it's officially spooky season, and you know what that means. For the rest of October, I'm going to be reviewing a whole bunch of spooky movies, ranging from great to not so great, all the way from the past up until now. And so for the first video, I figured that I'd go all the way back to 1931 and talk about one of the most classic horror movies ever made. Today, we're going to be talking about Frankenstein. Frankenstein, directed by James Whale, stars Boris Karloff and Colin Clive. The story follows Dr. Henry Frankenstein, who decides to play the role of God and bring life to a creature assembled from body parts of the deceased. After succeeding, the monster wreaks havoc on the town and must be stopped. It's pretty safe to say that Frankenstein is one of the greatest horror movies ever made and has had an enormous influence on the genre. Of course, there were some great horror movies before it, such as Jekyll and Hyde, Nosferatu, The Phantom of the Opera, and so much more. But since those were all silent films, Frankenstein was one of the first horror movies to incorporate sound. It truly is a classic when it comes to monster horror movies, and back when it was released in 1931, it was something brand new to the public. The opening sequence is already very unique when introducing the story, with Edward Van Sloan breaking the fourth wall, warning the audience that the movie may shock or even horrify them.
It may shock you. It might even horrify you.
By today's standards, though, I'm sure that there's some people out there that think Frankenstein doesn't deliver on this factor, but I can tell you right now that this is horror at its finest. Everything from the sets, the overall style, the performances, the simplicity of the story and horror elements. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's something in Frankenstein that everybody can love. Something that I and many others can appreciate about Frankenstein is how it's able to make the story work without a musical soundtrack. And the only time you ever hear music in this movie is during the opening and ending credits. For the entirety of the runtime, the film is mostly silent when it comes to the background noise, with some of the exceptions being the weather or the ambiance in the town. Pretty much every horror movie nowadays always puts so much emphasis on the sound and the music during certain moments of horror, and I think that Friday the 13th is one of the most notable when it comes to this. Here though, the lack of a musical soundtrack and only using natural sounds does a great job in immersing you in the atmosphere, and you really feel that sense of terror during certain scenes. And usually you'd expect some horrifying music when being placed in scenes with the monster, but thanks to the silence in this movie, it is really chilling to watch. Nope, I'm out, I am out, nope. It definitely isn't the most thrilling when it comes to horror, but for me, I really enjoy horror that sends a chill down your spine. Imagine how it must have been for people back when the movie was released, and how it made them feel to watch the monster slowly creeping his way through the castle. Along with the gothic style of the movie, as well as the fact that it's shot in black and white, it really enhances the experience, and the same can be said about the other classic Universal films such as The Wolfman, Dracula, and The Mummy. Something else that's really great about Frankenstein is how James Whale was able to create a monster that isn't pure evil, and actually one that you can feel sympathy for. And sure, the monster doesn't know any better considering the fact that he's made from old decaying body parts, but throughout this movie there are some scenes where the monster is shown to be a somewhat gentle and curious giant. When he's first introduced, he is terrifying, and thanks to the added element of silence during his scenes, he becomes very unpredictable, and you don't know whether he's getting ready to pounce or just give you the dead stare. But there are some nice little scenes in this movie with the monster where you can see him being curious, joyful, or sad, and it's something that you wouldn't expect. Even a little scene with the monster simply reaching for the light in a hopeful way is already something very emotional in its own right. It's almost like he's hoping to see the outside world, but because he's being held captive in Dr. Frankenstein's castle, it's contributing to his mental state, and he really doesn't know how to react. It's definitely one of the biggest things that can make him a terrifying entity, because just when you think you might be warming up to him, his strength and mental state could make you regret your decisions. Most of the bad stuff he does isn't too violent, and it also seems like he tries to be very careful in what he does. I know that in today's world, we're so desensitized to the violence portrayed in movies, and maybe when you watch it, you won't think it's that bad to watch, but looking back at 1931, I'm sure it was very disturbing to watch. And surprisingly enough, There were some moments in this movie that the monster actually managed to make me laugh. And I remember the first time I watched this movie, I couldn't stop laughing at this scene.
No, you're hurting me! No!
I hope I'm not the only one that finds that funny, only because it doesn't end up going well for the girl. Oh, geez. But probably the best part about the monster, he definitely wouldn't have worked without the performance of, spoiler alert, because the opening credits don't want you to know that, Boris Karloff. Some of the great horror icons like Lon Chaney in Phantom of the Opera or Bela Lugosi in Dracula, who was also originally going to play the monster, are already some of the few notable horror icons in that generation. But Boris Karloff made a name for himself after doing this film. His performance is one of the most chilling when it comes to the Universal monster lineup, and everything from his expressions and mannerisms make him probably the best choice when it comes to this role. Karloff's makeup job and costume are simple, but they're also very effective in making him look big and terrifying for the camera. And luckily, all he has to do is make random grunts and sounds, which can get a little bit silly to listen to at times, but he's still able to pull off all the silent moments in the film, and he can also make himself into a terrifying monster to be around. Karloff will always be the definitive Frankenstein, and his performance will always be a memorable one. Simply put, Frankenstein is one of the best horror movies ever made, and it will continue to remain timeless for years. For a film made almost 90 years ago, it's truly an accomplishment to see how much of an influence it's had on pop culture and how it's still being discussed to this day. The story is a simple but highly memorable one, the overall atmosphere creates an immersive setting, and the actors' performances aren't over the top like most horror movies, and it feels much more authentic. The fact that this film was able to work without the use of a musical soundtrack already shows how much better it is to sit through, and it shows one of the best ways to make horror movies work. Yes, it's a little dated in some parts, but at the same time, I think that's what makes Frankenstein work so much. And of course, it may be challenging for some people to sit through, but if you haven't given it a watch, I would highly recommend checking it out, because it really is a masterpiece, and it's a staple in the horror genre and movie history. So with all that in mind, you better believe that I'm going to be giving Frankenstein 10 out of 10 monster heads.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
So I'd like to know, what do you guys think of Frankenstein? Do you love it? Hate it? Not care to watch it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you made it this far in the video, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this review. Look forward to more very soon. And on Sunday, we're going to be reviewing something truly insane, and it's going to be quite the bloodbath. So stick around for that. Until then, you guys, I'll see you later.